started a settlement. We've also expanded into settlement work for newcomers to Canada.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And because of the technical difficulties, I'll just do a welcome again, just for those people who missed it. So thank you very much for joining us for the second phase of the community engagement session on our race identity-based data collection community engagement session. My name is Roseanne, and myself and Megan will be your moderator for tonight. I'm just going to begin with a land acknowledgement because we missed that at the very beginning. So the City of Toronto acknowledged that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and now is home to many diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis peoples. The city also acknowledged Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Williams Treaty, and the William Treaty signed with the multiple Mississaugas Chippewa bands. We're especially grateful to our three co-hosts that are on the line right now. What we are going to do is a little bit of housekeeping. So we are asking that everybody just keep their videos off, as well as if you can keep your mic off as well. If there are any questions, we would like people to use the chat function in between while the presentation is going on. If there will be an opportunity where we will ask you to use your raise hand button. So we're going to be asking you for some of those questions. And then if you also have questions, there will be a question period at the very end. And we'll also ask you to raise your hand, and we'll actually take a speaker's note from there. And that's about all the housekeeping that we have at the moment. So before we actually get started, the overview of the conversation this evening. First, you'll hear from Deputy Chief of Police Peter Ewan, and who will actually provide an overview of the engagement efforts. Then next will be Dr. Mai Fan, and I'm sorry, Miha. I'm not even going to try and butcher your name. I apologize about that. But you'll introduce yourselves as you kind of go on. Both Miha as well as Mai are from the Equity, Inclusion, Human Rights team, and they're joined by Deputy Ewan to share the next steps to our race identity-based data collection strategy. At this time, we'll ask you for input. And again, any questions, you can type them in the chat. We will have an opportunity for you to be able to ask some questions. We know that this is a different form in terms of what we're used to. Obviously, we're not able to meet with you in person, although we do miss those. So as a virtual component, we do ask you to raise your hands. And also the chat section, if you can actually just leave your questions specifically around the race-based data. If there are any other questions, we do have a number of other divisions from Toronto Police. If you have any questions specifically to your area, we can actually connect you to the police divisions within those areas. Okay, so now we'd like to start by having Deputy Ewan introduce, and I'm actually going to start a presentation as well.
Thank you, Roseanne. Good evening. Before I start, I want to thank the three organizations assisting us in hosting this event. I think I met Miranda before and Richard, and I do certainly look forward to meeting Pranay from the Alliance of South Asian AIDS Prevention. So thank you very much for assisting us and partnering with us for this important conversation tonight, and as we move forward to develop the race-based data collection policy. So before I get started, I want to take a couple minutes to explain why we're here. We're here today because during our last round of consultations, town halls about a year ago on race-based data collection, we heard you. We heard your comments and your feedback, and we heard that in order to get this right, we must do much more to gain your trust and acknowledge our mistakes. We're here to build that trust, not to erode it. These conversations are long overdue. Are they easy to have? Of course not. They are very uncomfortable. Talking about race and policing has been uncomfortable for a long time. And that's perhaps why it has taken us so long to get here. But here we are. We're here because we want to eliminate systemic racism in policing. We aren't the only one looking at how we can collect race-based data. The child welfare system is doing it. The education system is doing it. We are also doing it because we have recognized that systemic racism exists in these institutions. But in order to eliminate it, we need to understand it. One of the most powerful takeaways for me from the last round of town halls on this subject was from a community member who said this: police must be present, looking us in the eyes and realizing what we have been through. I myself am a racialized person. I have experienced racism throughout my lifetime. I have experienced racism by other members of the Toronto Police Service. Now, am I saying I can relate to the experience of a young Black person who is pulled over for speeding? No. Am I saying I can relate to the experiences of a South Asian male? No. No, we all have our own lived experiences. For some of you, this may be the first time you're joining us for these discussions, so I want to bring you up to date. So there's going to be slides that you can follow along as I do this presentation. In 2017, Ontario's Anti-Racism Act was passed with cross-party support to establish a legal framework for eliminating systemic racism and advancing racial equity. Further, in April 2018, the provincial government mandated the collection of race-based data by organizations, as I mentioned before, in the public sector, specifically child welfare, education, and justice sectors, and established the anti-racism data standards to provide guidance on the collection and analysis of the data. In response to this standard, the Toronto Police Service Board worked with stakeholders to develop and inform a new policy to identify, monitor, and eliminate potential systemic racism through the collection of race-based data. As we go forward, our Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights Unit is working with all relevant areas of the service to establish training, procedures, implementation plans, and guidance on the recording, storing, analyzing, and reporting of this data. Next slide, please. As you know, for the last few years, the Toronto Police Service has been undertaking a major modernization effort that will create a police service that is consistent, accountable, transparent, inclusive, and community-focused. Race-based data collection is the next logical step in a discussion the Toronto Police Service has been having for years about how to best support our members to ensure that they are delivering equitable, fair, and non-discriminatory policing service. We know how important it is to get this right. We must assure our communities that this data will allow the service to understand how our actions impact them and make operational decisions that would minimize over-policing, manage implicit bias, and help address suggestions of racial profiling. We must also be mindful of privacy concerns and work within our oversight framework that is rooted in integrity and professionalism. We will implement measures to ensure that race-based data is only available to designated and trained officer. We will consider a retention policy to ensure we are only keeping race-based data for an appropriate time, and will consider the impact of freedom of information requests. We have also committed to analyzing and reporting race-based data only after all personal identifiers have been removed. Phase 1 of our strategy started on January 1st, 2020. We began collecting race-based data for use of force incidents using the form that has been prescribed to us by the province, and also strip searches. The data is being collected using an officer's perception based on prescribed categories. Phase 2 is what we are here to tell you about today, and we'll get into those areas later. Next slide, please. Community engagement represents an integral part of this strategy. Over the period of 2019 to February 2020, we engaged in our largest community engagement endeavor ever to raise awareness about the race-based data strategy and gather public feedback to inform TPF decisions throughout the implementation process. A multi-pronged approach guided the service community engagement to ensure feedback from a geographic and demographical diversity of voices. It represents the concerted effort of various units across the Toronto Police Service and a range of community organizations serving diverse groups across the city. A series of 69 engagement opportunities led by 30 community organizations brought together over 880 members of diverse communities to voice their opinions about the service race-based data collection strategy. The map that you're seeing shows the location of community consultations across our city. 4 public town halls took place in neighborhoods representing different areas of the city: Alexander Park, Black Creek, Regent Park, and Malvern. About 60 people, 15 on average per town hall, participated in these town hall meetings. They were also live streamed on Facebook. With other social media efforts, we were able to reach thousands of people. Next slide, please. Our focus group sessions created a safe space for conversations. As you can see from these demographics, most of the attendees were young people from Black, East, Southeast Asian, and South Asian communities, and many were not born in Canada. It was critical that our focus group partners hosted individuals with lived experience that could properly inform our strategy. We also made a point of having no police presence at these sessions, so community members could freely express their views and engage in deeper conversation about the race-based data collection strategy. Next, I'll turn over to Dr. Mai Fan and Miha to take us through the next several slides.
Thank you, Deputy. Good evening, everyone. So let me introduce myself. My name is Mihaela Dinca Panaitescu. So you can understand right now why people feel so intimidated about pronouncing my name. So in short, I'm Miha. And this evening, I will walk you through some of the key findings emerging from the various engagement sessions that the Deputy mentioned. We invite you to check the report for more details. The report is available online. We also have a hard copy, so if you're interested in getting this copy, please contact our colleagues at Corporate Communications, and you'll get the report. One of the key themes emerging through the range of conversations was around the reconciliation and trust. Community members emphasized the need for the service to acknowledge its mistakes and harm caused. They see it as an act of humility that validates their experiences. And it is also a very important step to reconciliation with various communities. Participants also emphasize that trust is a key ingredient for the success of the race identity-based data collection strategy. And they hope that this strategy will improve the relationships between residents and police. People also made it very clear that they would like to stay engaged throughout the entire process of the strategy implementation. And they expect the service to design a process that will enable them to stay engaged and provide feedback at key stages throughout the strategy implementation. Through the series of community engagement, so next slide, please. People consistently voice their concerns about why this data is collected, how will be protected, and how will be used. Several participants questioned the need for collecting new data without taking concrete actions, as they felt that there are already several high-profile reports that documented racism in policing. They would like to see instead more concrete actions to address systemic racism. Community members were also concerned about the service not using the data in good faith. They were concerned that this data will be used to further stigmatize certain communities. People also question whether one strategy would be enough to address the broad issue of systemic racism. But despite skepticism and concerns, many participants regarded the strategy as an opportunity to hold the service accountable for its action in the community. They see it as an opportunity to support police officers to develop cultural awareness and skills to better interact with diverse groups. And they also hope that the strategy will provide evidence to bring more resources into disadvantaged communities. Next slide, please. Focus groups especially provided the space for more in-depth conversations around different ways of collecting data. And participants debated the merits of perception versus self-identification ways of collecting race information. Many community members regarded self-identification data on one hand as more accurate compared to perception data and more respectful as they have the opportunity to identify themselves instead of being labeled by others. But on the other hand, many people were reluctant to share their information, being concerned that once they share this information, they might be treated differently. Throughout these conversations, participants also provided nuanced feedback around the range of factors that might be impacting their decision about sharing or not sharing their information. The why behind the officer's request for information is critical. People emphasize that it's very important for them to know why they are asked for their information and how this information is relevant to their specific interaction with police. Participants also indicated that they would feel more comfortable to share their information with the neighborhood community officer rather than other police officers. And also a very important factor in their decision is the timing of the request. It's critical. And as you can see on the graph on the right bottom, most participants prefer to be asked for their information either at the end or after the interaction. After the interaction being the most preferred option. So this is in broad strokes what we heard from you. And as I mentioned before, please check the report for more details. And I will turn it back to the deputy to tell you more about the service commitment to act upon what we heard from you.
Thank you. So, what have we done with this feedback? When it comes to relationship building, we are committed to developing a dedicated Indigenous engagement strategy in collaboration with Indigenous groups. Committed to developing mechanisms that facilitate engagement with young people, those living with disabilities, including mental health and other members of the vulnerable groups. Developing a public awareness campaign to reach out to diverse communities and clearly communicate the scope, relevance, and key undertaking under the strategy. Creating a community advisory panel comprised of community members who have lived experiences, academics, and subject matter experts who will work closely with the service to advise data analysis, interpretation of results, and reporting. At this present time, we had over 300 applicants for this panel, and we expect to have that group in place by January 2021. When it comes to the management of the data, we are committed to do the following: develop an analytic framework to guide the analysis of race and identity-based data, and will engage internal and external stakeholders to reflect operational and community realities. We are also procuring an independent third party to conduct and publish an independent data analysis. And finally, we are developing an open data framework to provide public access to the identified data and analytics for research, policymaking, and advocacy. Next slide, please. We had significant feedback when it comes to the training of our officers. including how critical it is for service members to understand the purpose and foundational concepts of race and identity-based data collection to promote bias-free policing and enhance community trust. The service is developing a training curriculum that builds on community feedback, and it will roll out the training across the entire service to enable transformation from within. We have implemented multiple training delivery methods because we know this topic is too important for just online learning. We have delivered technical briefing for those members and supervisors who need to understand the legislative requirements in a deep and meaningful manner. We have implemented Indigenous experiences, anti-Black racism, and implicit bias training into the yearly requirement for all police officers. Our senior officers have received training on issues of equity and inclusion, as well as the race-based data collection, and we are providing both online and in-person training for our members. As the strategy evolves, and we will continue to engage with our communities, our training program will evolve and grow as well. Now I'll turn it over back to Miha and Maya for the rest of the slides.
Thank you, Deputy. One of the key themes we also heard from our engagements was how we should handle data and protect people's privacy. People were also concerned about data quality. It has to be accurate to give us reliable results that can be trusted. So the service looked at our data systems and practices and developed procedures to assess and handle race-based data in a secure and protected way and prevent its misuse. We engage with the Information and Privacy Commissioner and stakeholders on best practices to ensure that we also address concerns about data quality and retention so that we can analyze long-term trends and monitor changes over time in order to assess our progress. So the procedures that we developed addressed the entire data lifecycle, from the time the data is collected and recorded by officers and how is verified and approved by supervisors. We have secure data management systems in place to store and protect that data, including an existing cybersecurity policy that covers all the information that the service holds. Data needs to be compiled and anonymized for use in analysis. We have data extraction procedures in order to access that data for the purposes of analysis under the strategy. That process is limited to only authorized and designated staff who are responsible for preparing and assessing those data sets before using it, and are also responsible for securely retaining those data sets for 20 years. Next slide. So now we're coming to you for a few aspects of our strategy where we have developed a further analysis framework, and we need your advice. The race-based data analysis helps to support training and used to monitor, evaluate, and improve policies, procedures, and practices. Data has a purpose. It is not just data for data's sake. For trusted results, analysis has to be done in an open, transparent, and fair way. We are creating an analysis framework to guide our approach to looking at the data, and we need your advice. Analysis should be grounded in principles, for example, that are important and that reflect our priorities. So we've identified 4 key principles that we're presenting to you today for your input, and ask for your advice on what other principles should be included. So for example, analysis should center race and racial disparities. What that means is that while we focus on identifying whether there are disparities and disproportionalities in the treatment and outcomes experienced by individuals according to race, we're also interested in applying an intersectional lens in order to understand the unique experiences of individuals based on a combination of identities. So not just race, but race and identity, race and disabilities, and mental health, etc. That is critically important. Another important principle is that analysis should reflect engagement. That means that we need different perspectives and we need to include context and operational realities to understand our results. Another key principle is using sound methods that reflect best practices and innovative and accepted techniques for trusted and robust results. A fourth principle is that the analysis should be solution-oriented. That means that we ask the right questions in order to lead to actionable insights that can support positive change. It also means that analysis and interpretation is systems-focused and does not stigmatize communities. So we put the question to you today: what principles do you feel is important to guide TPS's analysis of data? We invite you to enter your comments or questions in the chat box, or raise your hand for us to enable your mic so that you can speak. I'll give a few minutes for that. And Megan and Roseanne, if you can read out loud some of the comments or questions.
So Dr. Fan, while we wait for any questions to come in or any feedback on that one question, we do have a comment on our YouTube live stream that I would like to post to you. It did come in earlier during the presentation. So the comment is, isn't the data what should be guiding policy making? And I'm going to, if I can, respectfully presume that the person means as opposed to the policy making driving the need for data collection, which I think is in reference to our earlier comments about the legislation pieces and things like that. But maybe you could speak to what the plans are for policy making once the data has been collected.
Absolutely. So I think this is a really important question to ask. And yes, the data should guide our decisions. Good decisions is based on evidence and is based on an informed decision-making process. So we did not start here today from square one. This conversation has been historically relevant for a long time. We can go back 30 years at least for the community's call that we need data to inform our understanding of the depth and reach of systemic racism in Canadian society. The lack of data to date and the patchwork of data to date has prevented us from really understanding the interconnectedness of the barriers and the structural challenges that are embedded in our systems. But we know from the data we do have, and we do have data, consistently has shown us that racialized, Indigenous, Black communities, communities from marginalized sectors of society, the homeless, poverty, those living in poverty, are disadvantaged in our society because of the way that our policies, our current policies, our historical policies and practices have gelled all of those disadvantages and left a legacy of harm. And so where we are today and in the province and recognizing that need, the Anti-Racism Act and the Anti-Racism Act's regulation and data standards was to establish a situation where we would have consistent data across all of the public sectors so that we would have a holistic understanding across all of our systems, how they play together to amplify disadvantages and harms for certain communities. And that includes gender diverse communities as well. And so we need data today more than ever. Our society is driven by data, and gaps around these social data is going to put us at a huge disadvantage in correcting some of those social harms that are becoming even more entrenched. We know inequalities are actually getting worse, not better. So we need data to guide us forward. We, in a better way. We have had a lack of data or inconsistent data that has prevented us from doing so. And so it is a little bit late, but it's better late than never.
Thank you, Dr. Fan. We don't have any other comments or raised hands at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just remind our participants that if you have a question later on or after you've had some time to go away and either review the community engagement report on our website or think about the presentation tonight, you can always send us your comments and questions after tonight. I will put the email address into the chat section of the presentation, but it's inclusion.data@torontopolice.on.ca. I'll also include the website for where you can find information about the race and identity-based data collection strategy, and there will be a link to the email as well on that website. We'll go on to the next question, Dr. Fan.
Okay, thank you. Next slide. So I want to talk specifically now about one of the principles, reflect engagement. Collaborative community-based analysis means that all stakeholders are involved and have a real opportunity to inform the analysis and the interpretation of results. Reality will always be more complicated than what the data can reflect. And there are many ways to understand things. That's why we need to engage often and in a meaningful way to understand what is going on more holistically. We will engage with affected communities and individuals with lived experiences, including diverse members of the city and our own officers. To understand specific interactions, we will look at the different contexts and factors that may be involved. For example, we will take into account situational factors, such as time of day, day of year, type of incident, type of offense or violation involved. We will look at individual factors such as gender, age, race, mental health, physical condition, behaviors, etc. And where the data is available, we may also look at officer factors that could be at play, such as rank, years of service, experience, etc. Importantly, we will also consider contextual factors, such as neighborhood and division characteristics that might influence outcomes or patterns that emerge in the results in order for us to understand it. So in short, in order to understand the results, we need to have the whole story, and we need your perspectives included. So our question to you is, what should we consider to understand the results from the public's perspective? I'll give a few minutes for you to type in your comments or questions in the chat box or raise your hands to enable your mic. And I encourage you to think about these questions. I know this is new for everyone, but I encourage you to say what's on your mind and share with us.
So we have, again, some comments on YouTube that I'm just going to pass along. We have one comment here. If you, Dr. Fan, could list your analysis of what the data gaps are, what are your suggestions in that regard, if you could share. We also have a separate question about a mental health call for service, but I'm unclear as to how it relates specifically to race-based data. So I'm going to ask that viewer if they could perhaps clarify. If it is only about mental health specifically, then we will take that offline as it does not relate to race-based data at the moment. But again, Dr. Fan, if you could just speak a little bit about, with your experience, with the analysis of the current data, what do you see as the gaps?
Fantastic, excellent question. And this sounds like someone who knows data. We know that there are always gaps in data. It's understanding what those gaps are is critically important. So with administrative data, and we are talking about police administrative data, it was originally collected for a different purpose, right? It is to support policing operations, not for research purposes. And we are turning the data now to another purpose for which it wasn't originally designed. And we'll make the most of it, but it's important to understand those limitations. So thank you very much for asking this question. Yes, there are data gaps. We don't collect about every single interaction or every single outcome of an interaction. We know our officers are out there every day having all kinds of interactions, both punitive and positive, in their enforcement role, but also in their helping roles. And where the data gaps exist that are the most glaring is those interactions that are related to their helping roles, or those interactions that lead to a positive outcome that does not involve enforcement. And so without those kinds of data, unfortunately, we have a very a kind of a tunnel vision into the types of outcomes that arise from their punitive enforcement functions of policing, which is not the whole picture. It is an important piece of the picture because it's an important power that police have that has a significant outcome and impact for communities and individuals, and absolutely we should look at them. But without good benchmarks, without a good wholesome picture, we are really limited in our understanding of the things that result from interactions with policing every day.
Thank you, Dr. Pham. I'm going to take the liberty to reframe a part of a comment here, and really because I think it's an important question to ask, how does the service plan to collect race and identity data from somebody who's under the age of 18?
Excellent question. So under the age of 18, they fall under, the ambit of the Youth Criminal Justice Act and the youth, and also all the record-keeping restrictions under that act to protect a young person's privacy. So those things will guide and affect our ability to use the data, or publish the data in certain ways. However, we recently, but understanding youth outcomes is critically important, especially when we're looking at racial disparities and disproportionalities. Racialized Black and Indigenous youth are a fast-growing population, and they experience very unique challenges today. And so understanding disparities experienced by youth is going to be a critical focus. And so our legal team went before Youth Justice Court in order to request access and authorization for us to access those records, anonymize them, and use them for the purposes of this race-based data collection strategy, which is to address and monitor and eliminate systemic racism and racial disparities for youth. I'm very pleased to say our legal team did a great job in securing that access. And so we will be analyzing information of youth interactions with police under our strategy. Deputy, did you want to add anything?
No, I'm fine.
Thanks, Dr. Pham. Perhaps we'll move along to the next question.
Okay, next slide, please. So we want to turn the conversation now to another area where we are asking your advice in order to expand our understanding of how we are doing in other types of interactions. Currently, as Deputy Ewan said, the strategy covers use of force reports and strip searches. Those are important areas that we started with in January 1st, 2020. And we are currently in the process of assessing that data that we've been collecting over the year and preparing to analyze them, guided by you and the analysis framework that we are speaking with you here today. Looking ahead, we want to also look at other areas that are your priorities for this strategy in order to help us be transparent, be accountable, and be a more equitable and inclusive police service. So our question to you, what police interactions do you think we should focus on next and add to our analysis and public reporting? I'll give a few minutes for folks to type in their comments in the chat boxes, and feel free to raise your hand. We can activate your mic if you wish to speak. Don't be shy, folks. It's a lot of slow typers out there, maybe.
No, I just want to add for the participants, we start off with strip search and use of force. And as Dr. Fan and we all can acknowledge, we receive over 2 million radio calls calling the Toronto Police Service for services every year. That's documented, people calling us, and we have many other interaction in community engagement, such as traffic stops, such as in public events. So there's so many opportunities for our officer to interact both positively and I use the term negatively with the Toronto Police Service. And certainly for us to have a more robust database to guide our policies and how we move forward in delivering services to citizens of Toronto, I think we can expand past strip searches and use of force reports and to other areas where we can collect meaningful data and to analyze it and share that with the public, and also guide us in how we move forward as an organization.
So we do have a request for us to repeat the question. So the question is, where else should we be collecting the data to analyze and report? So as the deputy just mentioned, as of January 1st, we currently collect race-based data for strip search incidents and use of force incidents. So the next question will be, as we move into the next phase of our community engagement strategy, race-based data collection strategy, what other interactions should we start collecting race and identity-based data for? We do have a comment here that mental health is one of those interactions where we should be collecting data. Again, perhaps Dr. Fan or Deputy Ewan could speak to that.
Let me speak to that first. I am the Toronto Police Service lead on the Mobile Crisis Intervention Team. That's a team where we're made up of specially trained Toronto police officer, partner with mental health nurses to attend person in crisis calls, and we are working with the community delivering mental health communities in people with lived experiences, organizations, and we are very, very seriously looking at collecting data when we have interaction with people, person in crisis that comes into contact with the Toronto Police Service. Yes, we will continue to look at that area, and I'm very confident that that will be one of the categories we'll be collecting, the race-based data.
Thank you, Deputy. Another question here for you is, as someone new to use of force reports, perhaps you could elaborate on what the end-to-end process is. Again, this is in the context of data. When we think of data, we should be thinking about processes, information systems, and people. So how does the data get collected as part of that use of force report? If you could go through that process a little bit for the audience.
Sure, I will attempt to answer this, and then once it gets to the data analysis and collection, after the collection, I maybe pass off to Dr. Fan. So let me explain or take us a little journey on what a use of force report is. Use of force report is mandated by the provincial government anytime a police officer, not only Toronto police officer, but any officers in the province of Ontario that uses force on an individual, maybe to effect an arrest most of the time, or to take someone into custody or control a situation. Use of force means that we have to place our hand on an individual. A lot of people asked by the Toronto Police Service showing up or verbally, is that a use of force? No, that is not a use of force. Use of force could be as simple as placing a hand onto someone into using deadly firearms. So once that's done, there's this prescribed provincial form we must fill out after each encounter where a police officer uses force. And currently, after the interaction is over, the officer must fill in a box with the prescribed categories with from the officer's perception, what that individual perceived to be in terms of his color. And then once that's done, the report will be submitted and it'll be analyzed. And I'll leave the analyzing and part to Dr. Fan.
Thank you. And if you want to look more into and understand better the provincial requirements around use of force reports, the form itself is online in the Ontario Registry Forms, and I encourage you to look at that there, and then you can understand the situations that Deputy was describing, in which all police services in Ontario are required to submit the form, as well as all the data that's collected in that form, as well as, and a throwback to the person who asked about data gaps, what are the data gaps around understanding use of force reports? You can see that in the form itself. So once the form is completed and verified by the supervisor, it's submitted to the college. College checks the data before submitting it to the province. The province requires all police services to submit the form and submit the data to them with all the identifying information strips, of course, for their analysis. But Toronto Police Service also has, retains in anonymous format, again, the information for this purpose, for the purposes of the race-based data strategy, so that we can look at patterns of uses of force, types of force used, and outcomes. So did it result in or involve injuries that require medical attention, the subject or the officer, what were the conditions, so there is some certain information that's included in the form that we can also use and include in our analysis of those incidents that result in a use of force report.
Thank you. Just while we wait to see if any other questions or comments come in, Deputy Ewan, perhaps you could share with us, you have been leading the community engagement process for this race-based data collection strategy since the beginning. Perhaps you could share with us why that is important to you as a member of our command team, and as well, if you could touch on the importance of the strategy as a whole to the chief and the rest of the command team, please.
Yes, Dr. Fan alluded to earlier. Every time we speak about race, it's a very difficult journey, difficult conversation. And this is not something new to policing or to public institutions, such as child welfare and education. We'd be having conversations for the last 30, 40 years. The public has asked for it. And the Toronto Police Service certainly acknowledged that we have not had these honest conversation and candid conversations. So we, in fact, that we're part of the problem causing systemic racism, or to a certain extent. So this is important for the command, for the chief and the command team. This is a top-driven, and this is a commitment from top to bottom. The importance is to communicate to the public that this is, yes, it is a provincial guide policy, but we take it very seriously, and also the board has asked us to have a real conversation, and public consultations is paramount in getting this right. I like to say this. We always have been prescribing police services, and this is the police service for the last number of years has always been very prescriptive. Prescriptive policing is not going to be the way moving forward. It has to be a participation, has to be a consultative. And the public, and I said it earlier, and my fellow panel presenters also said it. It has to be coming from the public, and it's an organic process. The public must tell us what they believe we should be doing moving forward. And having the chief and the command team and our senior leaders and senior management of the Toronto Police Service committed to this. This is a message both internally and externally to each and every member of the Toronto Police Service and to our community members. We take this seriously, and we intend to work together with the community, and we want to see this succeed, not to fail.
Thank you. We have a question also from our YouTube live stream. Does the OIPRD collect race data?
Yes. So under the Anti-Racism Act regulation, the OIRPD is collecting race-based data, so not just race, but also ethnic origin, indigenous identity, and religion in all complaints from the public about police. I will also mention that the Strategic Special Investigations Unit, are also required to collect that information in all death investigations, as well as bail courts. So when Deputy Ewan mentioned justice sector, those are the sectors, those are the areas we're talking about, including youth and adult corrections and police services. So we need to understand the pipeline within the criminal justice system, but we also need to understand the school to prison pipeline and the child welfare to prison pipeline. And that's why I believe the Anti-Racism Act regulated school boards and child welfare at the same time.
Thank you. Again, Dr. Fan, I'm going to ask you and Deputy Ewan to move on in the presentation, please.
Okay. So we just wanted to kind of summarize the questions that we posed to you tonight and ask that you take it back with your family, your friends, your coworkers, discuss this and have conversations and think about what advice you would provide to us. What principles should guide our analysis? What should we consider to understand the impacts that we have with communities and in communities? And also, where else should we collect and report race and identity-based data in order to understand and improve our systems? And I think, as Deputy was saying, and Miha was relaying from what we heard from you, is that we cannot do this without community. For decades and decades and decades, community has been leading and pushing for change. And institutions are slow to change and are resistant to change. Power is resistant to giving it up. And so this is a really, really different approach to data and to using data in order to challenge how the status quo, challenge how we are doing things, and leading us to change that benefits everyone. Because when we benefit the least of us, then all of us are lifted. And when I say the least of us, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean that that's how the system has positioned people into winners and losers, and we want to position it in a different way. It's not a zero-sum game. I think we will only advance and improve as a society if everyone is lifted. And so this approach is really taking a bottom-up approach, guided by your voices, guided by the lived experiences and the wisdom that exists within our community, and leveraging all of our advantages, leveraging all of our tools together to turn the ship. And the ship is a big one. It's going to take a long time. We don't expect change right away. We expect we're going to make mistakes, but we hope that we can make them and learn them together. And that's it. I hope we hear from you. Our email address to send us your feedback, your thoughts, your comments, your advice is inclusiondata@torontopolice.on.ca. Please feel free to drop us a line.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for listening to us for the last hour. And I once again want to thank our community organization for partnering with us tonight. It's really encouraging for me to sit here as a police officer and having this conversation with the community. And Roseanne said it earlier, we wish we could do it in person, but this will do. But I am going to make a commitment to the community that this team will go back to the community, because this is not a one-time conversation. This is a continuous conversation. Only with continuous conversation we can get this done and get this done better. You know, in recent years, the Toronto Police Service has been going through a significant cultural shift in the way we deliver service. It's no longer us versus you, us versus them mentality. We recognize that to make our community safer, we need to work in collaboration. That's including you. We must be more transparent and more accountable. This conversation, after all these years, we're here. We're finally here. So let's continue the dialogue, continue to make changes, and continue to provide your input to us. We want to make this right. So once again, I want to thank everyone for signing on and participating in this extraordinary time. I know the COVID situation is certainly somewhat impacting our mental well-being, but this is an important conversation, and I want to thank you again for taking time out to spend some time with us. And also, what you heard tonight, please share with people that you associate with, you work with, that you have impact with. Share with people, because the more we talk about this, you'll make this race-based data collection strategy that much better, that to work for the Toronto Police Service, but more importantly, that will serve the community that much better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Nguyen. Miranda?
Oh, I don't know. I got unmuted, but I just want to say on behalf of all the community organizations, thank you so much for including us in the first initial stages as well as the report back. I think our communities will be very excited to hear that the conversation, I guess, is ongoing and that you're still looking for more feedback and thoughts. So thank you so much for including us in the work that you're doing in this area.
Awesome. Likewise, we thank you very much for your partnership. Parnay?
Again, thank you so much for having ASAP being a part of this. I wasn't personally able to be part of this discussion because I recently started working at ASAP, but I look forward to more of these conversations and connecting more closely with TPS and working on this next phase of the action plan that we discussed today. Thank you.
Absolutely, and we thank you very much, ASAP, for supporting us. And the last one, Richard Lee.
Thank you. We're really happy to have this opportunity. Definitely, we will work together with the Toronto Police and continue to serve the community.
Okay, thank you so much. There aren't any additional questions. Oh, there's one more? Okay.
Sorry, before we draw the event to a close, I'm just going to put forward a couple of comments that were left on YouTube, because I think that there are a couple of very important comments that were made. One, there's a comment about how great it would be to release the data as feedback for the city. And I know we touched on that briefly, but perhaps Dr. Fan, you could speak about the plans the service does have to release our data to the public for feedback and for input.
Absolutely. So one of the critical pillars of the race and identity-based data strategy is transparency. And that means that we commit and have committed to and are committing to an open data, open analytics approach. So the data that we will have access to and will be analyzing will be de-identified, as the deputy mentioned earlier, in order to protect personal privacy, but allow the public, communities, community organizations, policymakers, advocacy groups to have access to the same data we have, to challenge our analysis, to verify our analysis, to ask their own questions, and engage in a public conversation and dialogue about where we're going as a city, where we're going as police service, understanding our issues in a new way, in a different way, adding your voices and perspectives to the conversation. I think that will just make it that much more richer. I think the anxieties about open data that existed a few years back has been proven kind of nil, and openness, as they say, sunlight is the best disinfectant. So we're hoping that open data will be that.
One more thing I want to add to Dr. Fan is that the Toronto Police Services Board takes this policy, this strategy very seriously. And they have mandated that we shall, the Toronto Police Service shall report each and every year in an open public forum the data that we collected, how we analyze it, and in what format we need to present it. And I mentioned it earlier, this is the only data portal that will have its own oversight body. And we have over 300 applicants of this oversight body to scrutinize, I use that term, and to look at what we do and how we manage the data, how we store the data. And so, and I think this advisory body will be in action very soon in 2021 in January. So these are some of the features that have been built in to ensure the integrity and the data will not be misused. Because I know that when we did our first round of consultations, many members of the public were very concerned about data can be manipulated and it'll be skewed, or it could be distorted. So these are the oversights that would be, and reporting structures that have been built in to ensure transparency and accountability.
Thank you, Deputy. And just as we wrap up tonight, I'm going to give you the final words here, and more in response to a comment that was left on YouTube, because I think it provides an opportunity for you to really speak about the approach for the broader service. So the comment is, the whole world is going through this right now. We demand a change in policing and justice culture. And I think that provides you with an opportunity just to speak about the service's commitment to the Equity and Inclusion and Human Rights Unit, the members of which have been driving forward with this strategy and really leading the service in this regard. And if you could just bring some comments, I think, to draw the event to a close on the steps the service is taking, I think that would be appreciated by our viewers.
Well, certainly, we're not tone deaf. We see what's going on around globally. In our own city, and we are hearing a cry for changes, and we believe in changes, and we want to change. And I mentioned earlier, we cannot and will not be delivering service by prescriptive policing. Has to be consultative, has to be collaborative, and this is a good example. I'm very proud to say, on behalf of the Toronto Police Service and my colleagues sitting next to me, that we're the only service in Ontario that has consulted extensively with the community on race-based data, and other service did not take this opportunity. But we want to hear from our community members, because we know we will not get it right without your participation. So that comment, we take that to heart, and we will change. We will change with the consent and with the participation of the community. So thank you very much for that comment.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Thank you to Dr. Fan and Miha for joining us this evening. Again, just a reminder, if you have feedback after tonight's session, please contact us either through email or visit our website for more information. This will not be the last of our community engagement sessions. We have 2 more scheduled, one for next Tuesday and one for next Thursday. They both start at 6:30. The links to participate via WebEx or watch live on YouTube can be found on the service's website as well as on Twitter. Again, I'd like to thank our panelists, our community organizations who co-hosted the event, my co-moderator, Roseanne Bailey. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your time with us this evening. We appreciate how valuable it is, and we are grateful for your participation. Please be safe and have a good evening. Thank you.